It started with a notice on my door that I barely glanced at. Something about infrastructure improvement. I figured it was sidewalk repairs or pothole patching. 2 weeks later, I came home to the sound of jackhammers inside my house. No warning, no consent, just a work crew tearing through my living room wall like it was an abandoned shack. The worst part? The HOA claimed I had agreed to it. I didn't even know you could pave a public access road through private property. Until they did it. And I wasn't going to just sit back and let them roll a bulldozer over my life. This is the story of how the HOA tried to turn my house into a highway, and how I made them regret every inch of it. If you want to hear how I turned the tables on them, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss how this wild story ends. I didn't even notice the signs at first. There were a few orange flags on the grass a few houses down. A stack of cones appeared near the cul-de-sac. That wasn't anything unusual. This neighborhood always had someone fixing a sprinkler or beautifying the community or whatever the HOA called it in their monthly emails I never read. So I ignored it, like most of us did. But the day it got personal started like any other. I left for work at 7:15 a.m., coffee in one hand, keys in the other, mind already spinning with deadlines. My house was normal when I left, quiet, intact. The living room window still had the small crack I'd been meaning to fix since last spring. By 3:47 p.m., that window, and the entire wall around it, was gone. I pulled into the driveway to find a city construction truck parked on my lawn. At first I thought it had veered off the street. But then I saw the metal fence that had been hastily bolted into the sidewalk, cordoning off the front of my property. A neon vest guy waved at me like it was no big deal. Behind him was a scene, straight out of a disaster movie. My living room wall had been knocked clean out. What used to be carpet and furniture was now a mess of dust, broken drywall, and skid marks from heavy machinery. And there, right in the middle, was the massive scoop of a bulldozer. Idle, as if it had just punched its way into my home and decided to take a break. I didn't scream. I didn't even say anything at first. I just stood there, staring, trying to make sense of it. One of the workers finally noticed me and jogged over. "You the homeowner?" he asked casually, brushing his hands off like he'd just finished planting some flowers. I nodded. "Yeah, we're laying down the connector road today. It's part of the HOA infrastructure update." Connector road? In my house. I marched toward the front porch, or what was left of it, and tried to find someone who looked like they had real authority. I spotted a woman in a reflective vest holding a clipboard and talking into a walkie-talkie. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "What is this? What are you doing to my house?" She looked at me with mild surprise, like she hadn't expected a homeowner to actually show up. "You're Mr. Graham, right?" I nodded again. "We have you listed. This section of your property was marked for community access development last quarter. The HOA approved the easement and filed the changes back in April." "Community access development?" I repeated. "You mean a road through my house?" She gave me that bureaucratic smile people use when they don't want to explain something messy. "It's just a connector. Won't take more than 12 feet across. The plans are public. Should have been mailed to you." I hadn't received a single notice. Not an email, not a flyer, not even one of those annoying folded letters the HOA usually leaves on my door whenever my grass is 2 inches too high. But somehow they had filed paperwork to bulldoze a chunk of my home? I pushed past her and stepped over the mess into what used to be my living room. My couch was half buried under broken beams. My coffee table had been crushed into splinters. A family photo had fallen off the wall and was now lying in a pile of insulation. And through the hole where my front wall had been, I could see the street crew pouring gravel, that led directly into my house like it was some sort of highway on-ramp. I felt like I was losing my mind. I went back out and demanded a copy of whatever paperwork they claimed gave them permission to do this. The clipboard lady handed me a stack of pages with highlighted sections and some rough sketches of a greenway corridor. My address was on it, but the drawing didn't even look like my house. There was no formal signature from me, just a printed note. Easement presumed per HOA Article 7.3. I didn't know what Article 7.3 was, but I knew I never gave permission for anyone to touch my house, much less demolish it. I called the police. They arrived 30 minutes later, talked to the construction lead, glanced at the paperwork, and then pulled me aside with that look cops get when they're annoyed but trying to stay polite. "Sir, it looks like this is a civil issue. Between you and your HOA," one of them said. "If they've got permits and authorization on file, it's not criminal." "So they can just bulldoze my house?" I asked. "If it's part of a legally filed easement?" "Technically, yes." That word, technically, hit me like a punch to the chest. The officer handed me a card for a lawyer and suggested I take it up with the HOA directly. Then he got back in his cruiser and drove off, like this was just another Tuesday. I stood there on my porchless front step, looking at the crater where my living room used to be, watching construction workers shovel rebar and cement into what had been my floor, and I realized something. This wasn't just a mistake. This was personal, or power, or both, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next morning, I walked out of what was left of my house with a legal pad, a thermos of black coffee, and a headache that hadn't let up since the bulldozer incident. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. How could I, knowing there was now a gravel path leading directly through the center of my living room like it was a public bike trail? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that metal scoop pressing through drywall, the absurd confidence on that clipboard woman's face, and the way the cop said, "If it's legally filed, there's not much we can do." But I wasn't done. Not even close. I started with the HOA office, located in that ridiculous faux brick clubhouse at the edge of the neighborhood. It had the usual: a flagpole out front, bland hedges trimmed into meaningless shapes, and a sign with the slogan, "Protecting our community values." I nearly laughed reading it. Inside, I asked to speak with someone from the board. The receptionist, a young guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, told me the board only meets twice a month and that I'd need to file a formal request if I wanted an appointment. But when I told him my house had been demolished, he raised his eyebrows and clicked around on his computer. "That's probably related to the easement expansion," he mumbled, pulling up a file. "Let me get the vice president for you. One sec." 5 minutes later, I was face to face with Dennis Weller, the HOA's vice president. Balding, khaki-clad, and annoyingly smug, Dennis looked like someone who got way too excited about enforcing sprinkler schedules. "I understand you have some concerns," he said, motioning for me to sit. I didn't. "You tore open my house. Without my permission?" I said. "I want to see exactly what gave you the right to do that." He didn't flinch. Instead, he turned around and pulled a file folder from a cabinet like he had it ready. "We've been planning this easement for over a year," he said. "It was voted on in the November meeting, fully documented, with the majority in favor." "I wasn't at that meeting," I replied. "Well, attendance isn't mandatory," he said with a fake smile. "But the agenda was posted publicly. We sent emails, put flyers in mailboxes. You must have seen something." No, I hadn't, and I looked for those notices afterward. I dug through my email inbox. Nothing. Not even spam. As far as I could tell, I was left in the dark on purpose. I flipped through the folder he handed me. It had blurry diagrams of the proposed community connector, marked in dotted red lines. The line passed near my property, but the map wasn't detailed enough to show exact coordinates. There was also a Resolution 47B, stamped by the board and dated 5 months ago. The language was vague. A proposed connector path through common access zones and adjacent areas. "Adjacent areas?" I asked. "So that means, what, private property?" He shrugged. "The HOA has broad latitude when it comes to community improvements." That's when it clicked. They were banking on that vagueness. The average person, like me, would never even notice it. And if they did, it was too late. By the time the first jackhammer hit drywall, they'd already covered themselves with technicalities and paperwork. But I knew my house, and I knew my lot lines. Back home, I went straight to the drawer where I kept all my property documents, deeds, survey maps, insurance records. I pulled out the original survey from when I bought the house. The boundary was crystal clear. My land stretched 2 feet beyond the front wall of the house. Everything that was now torn apart by the construction crew, including the living room, was 100% mine. There was no easement, no clause in the deed, no right-of-way, which meant they were lying. Either they assumed they had the right, or they were counting on me not knowing I had the power to fight it. That same day, I took everything. My deed, the survey, even pictures of the destruction to a local property lawyer named Monica Grayson, who came highly recommended. She had that calm but sharp look of someone who knew exactly how to peel apart HOA nonsense. After 1 hour in her office, she pushed the documents aside and gave me the answer I needed. "You're not crazy," she said. "This is a mess, and, unless they've hidden some very specific clause in your original purchase agreement, you've got a strong case." She explained how HOAs sometimes operate in this gray zone of authority, using vague language and years-old resolutions to push through projects that would never hold up in court. Most homeowners didn't fight back because the cost, the time, and the legal jargon overwhelmed them. But if you're willing to push, Monica added, they'll back off, fast. The last thing they want is a public legal battle, especially one where they're wrong. That night, I sat on a lawn chair in the shell of my living room, drinking cold coffee and watching workers finish laying the gravel. They didn't even make eye contact anymore. I knew then, this wasn't just about a road, it was about control. About a board so used to getting their way, they didn't even blink at violating private property, because they assumed no one would question them. But they didn't expect me, and they definitely didn't expect what I was going to do next. I thought the worst was over when I found out they had no real easement. But I underestimated how far the HOA was willing to twist the truth to protect themselves. The day after meeting with Monica, the lawyer, I filed an official cease and desist order through her office. It was sent to both the HOA president and the construction company. We were asking for an immediate halt to all work on the so-called connector road and for a formal explanation of what legal grounds they were operating under. But they didn't halt anything. In fact, the next morning, I woke up to the sound of fresh cement being poured inside my house. They'd removed more drywall, pushed in a steel divider, and now, right through where my coffee table used to be, was a 6-foot-wide concrete path with embedded curbstones on either side. It looked like a sidewalk had been surgically implanted through my living room. I lost it. I marched outside, threw on whatever I had, no shoes, no jacket, and confronted the foreman. He didn't even look surprised. He handed me a document from a folded folder, prepped like he was waiting for me. "Per your HOA agreement," he said, "your property has been partially allocated for community access in accordance with Civic Overlay Map 3.2. What the hell is a Civic Overlay Map? It's part of the regional zoning framework adopted by your HOA 5 years ago, he said, as if that explained anything. Back inside, I scanned the document. It looked official. But something felt off. It referenced maps, zoning clauses, overlay plans, none of which had been mentioned when I bought the house. It was jargon layered on jargon. So I sent everything to Monica again. An hour later, she called me back, this time with her voice raised for the first time. "They're trying to bury you in procedural BS, she said. "That document is real, but it doesn't apply to your property. It's referencing a zoning overlay from a different phase of the neighborhood. You're in Phase 1. That map is for Phase 3, which hasn't even been built yet. They're claiming it applies to me. They hope you won't fight it." By this point, I was living in half a house. I'd moved the bed to the guest room in the back because my master bedroom was full of dust. I'd sealed off the front half with a tarp because of the cold air rolling in through the open wall. My dog refused to enter the living room now. Every time he saw the workers, he just growled and ran back to the bedroom. The HOA? Silent. Not a single call. Not a knock on the door. Not even one of those smug little newsletters with gardening, tips and parking reminders. They were hoping I'd give up. But instead, I went deeper. I started talking to my neighbors. Quiet conversations on the sidewalk. A few of them had noticed the construction, but no one really knew the extent of it. One guy across the street, Gary, told me something interesting. "I remember getting a survey months ago," he said. "Some HOA thing. They asked if I'd support a connector road through the old Greenbelt area. I said no and never heard back. I asked him if he remembered what Greenbelt area meant. He pointed behind his house, toward a patch of land that bordered a row of pine trees, nowhere near my house. But the HOA had bundled it all together in that vague resolution. Easement approval for connector routes through Greenbelt-adjacent zones. What they really meant was, wherever we want. The deeper I looked, the more it reeked of manipulation. The HOA used technical language and long-forgotten votes to justify something they never had clear approval for, and they relied on people being too busy, too confused, or too tired to fight back. But now I wasn't just mad. I was obsessed. I started building a case, not just legal, but visual. I took photos daily. The progression of the road, the damage to my house, the way workers dumped materials on my private lawn. Monica told me to document everything, especially the before and after of my living space. One photo in particular stood out. It was from my doorbell camera. Time-stamped at 6:04 a.m., 2 days after I filed the cease and desist. It showed two men in construction vests unloading concrete from a flatbed and dragging it across my welcome mat. Unauthorized entry, destruction of property, trespassing. Now we had more than a dispute. We had potential criminal charges. I went back to the HOA office again. This time, I didn't ask to speak with Dennis. I walked straight into the boardroom during one of their meetings. I know it wasn't professional, but after someone tears down part of your house, you stop caring about formalities. "Mr. Graham," Dennis said when he saw me, "you can't be in here. This meeting's closed." "You paved through my living room. You don't get to tell me what's closed." The rest of the board members looked stunned. A few stared down at their tablets. One woman, the treasurer, I think, looked genuinely embarrassed. I dropped a folder of photos on the table. "This is everything you've done. Illegal construction, misrepresented zoning, no actual easement, and now, criminal trespass." I waited. The room was dead silent. Then Dennis leaned back and said the most infuriating thing I've ever heard. "We're just doing what's best for the community. No apology, no concern. Just that smug HOA standard excuse. Best for the community." That's when I knew this wasn't going to end with paperwork. They had bulldozed the wrong house and underestimated the wrong person. The HOA had made one big mistake. They thought I was alone. That assumption cracked the moment I walked out of the clubhouse boardroom and straight into the parking lot, where Gary and 2 other neighbors were waiting for me. Clipboard in hand, signatures already scribbled down. "Got 16 so far," Gary said. "People are pissed." Turns out word had spread. My neighbor across the alley, a nurse named Evelyn, found a crew on her side yard staking the ground. 2 blocks over, a family with kids had their swing set removed and replaced with gravel, and nobody told them either. It was happening all over our neighborhood in small, quiet invasions. So we stopped being quiet. That weekend, I hosted what I called the first real HOA meeting. Right in the front yard, folding chairs on my torn-up lawn, people bringing their own snacks and outrage. I printed out color copies of the civic overlay map, the legal property boundaries, the so-called easement resolution. I even passed around the photo of my living room mid-construction, complete with a guy in a vest eating a sandwich on what used to be my couch. By the end of the afternoon, we had over 40 households agreeing to sign a formal complaint. Even better, 2 were former city planners, and 1 was a retired civil engineer who absolutely lit up when I showed him the construction. "This road doesn't meet code," he muttered, tracing the edges of the cement with his foot. "The grading's wrong. There's no drainage. This whole thing's a lawsuit waiting to happen." Music to my ears. The next day, I brought in a private surveyor. Took less than 3 hours to confirm what I already knew. The HOA road ran 23 feet into my legal property line. We stamped the survey results, uploaded everything, and Monica filed a formal suit. Not just a cease and desist this time, but a civil damages claim for property violation and unlawful construction. Now, I could have waited and let the legal system do its thing. But let's be honest, court cases take months, maybe years. Meanwhile, there was still a literal road in my living room, and the HOA hadn't slowed down. They were still laying pavers 2 streets over, now trying to extend the path toward the community pool. So I decided to hit back, not with a lawsuit, but with a detour. That night, Gary and I, along with a few of the more enthusiastic neighbors, bought 30 feet of temporary fencing, a couple "do not enter" signs, and a lot of plywood. We waited until 2 a.m. Then we blocked off the path, not just in my yard, but across 3 other properties. We redirected the path's exit into the HOA's prized rose garden by the clubhouse. It was a mess. We even painted our own signs. Private property, no trespassing. Construction halted by court order. Okay, It wasn't yet, but the paperwork was filed. We even put up a fake plaque that said, "This road is temporarily closed due to HOA incompetence. Please contact your local tyrant for questions." By noon the next day, the HOA board exploded. They sent emails, then official letters. Then a community violation alert slipped under every door, accusing me, and several others, of vandalism and obstruction of a sanctioned improvement. But we were ready. Every neighbor who participated wrote formal affidavits, stating they were defending their legal boundaries. Monica backed it up with copies of the property lines. The retired engineer wrote a full report on the dangerous slope of the road and filed it with the local municipality. Then came the bombshell. Monica discovered that the HOA never registered the construction permits with the city. They skipped it entirely, probably to save money. Or maybe they thought small projects like this wouldn't attract attention. Wrong move. Monica filed an emergency injunction. The city sent inspectors within 48 hours. By the end of the week, the project was officially declared non-compliant and unsafe for residential proximity. Work was ordered to stop immediately, but I wasn't done yet. I walked into the next HOA meeting with my neighbors behind me, folders in hand, legal docs ready, and, this time, a news crew. Yep. A local station caught wind of the sidewalk, house invasion, and wanted to do a story. I gave them full access. Interviews, photos, a walkthrough of my chopped-up living room. They aired it on a Thursday night, and by Friday, everyone in town was talking about it. Suddenly, the HOA went silent. No more letters, no more threats. And Dennis? Gone. Word was he stepped down to focus on family. Yeah, right. By the time the dust settled, the HOA had no choice. They issued a full statement claiming the road project had been miscommunicated and mismanaged. They offered to pay for repairs on all damaged properties, and Monica made sure they agreed, in writing, to never touch a square inch of my land again. Me? I took their check, bulldozed the ugly cement trail, and rebuilt my living room better than ever. And just for good measure, I installed a bright red doormat that says, "No trespassing, seriously." You know what they don't tell you about winning? It's not that everything goes back to normal. It's that everything changes because you stood your ground. After the HOA agreed to the settlement and construction officially stopped, my house slowly returned to something resembling a home. But it wasn't a reset. It was more like a rebuild with battle scars. I could still see faint marks on the floor where cement had been poured. I kept a framed photo of the original road running through my living room, not because I liked it, but because I never wanted to forget what they did. And the best part? The HOA never set foot on my property again. They didn't even knock. Not when they delivered newsletters. Not for routine inspections. Nothing. It was like I had been quietly red flagged on their secret list. Do not engage with this homeowner, unless legally required. That suited me just fine. In fact, it sparked a whole new attitude in the neighborhood. People started speaking up more. The woman 2 streets over who'd had her fence adjusted by the board without notice, she demanded it be fixed and got it rebuilt. Evelyn, the nurse, organized a residents-only committee to oversee future HOA projects. And Gary? He ran for a board seat, and he won. I figured if they can pave a road through your house, he joked at the first meeting, I can probably pave a better future from inside the room. Classic Gary. But here's where it got really interesting. Few weeks after the news segment aired, I got a letter, not from the HOA, but from a lawyer representing a former board member. Apparently, several board members had no idea how far Dennis had gone with the road project. He'd bypassed standard voting, signed contracts solo, and fudged the language on official proposals to sneak it through. Their lawyer asked if I'd be willing to sign a witness affidavit, because now they were suing him. I didn't gloat. I just signed the paper and handed it back. I never saw Dennis again, but I heard he moved to another neighborhood across town, one without an HOA. The irony? Perfect. As for my own house, I finally took the settlement money and made some upgrades. Hardwood floors, built-in shelves, a full security system with cameras covering every angle, just in case anyone got construction happy again. I even turned the part of the house where the road used to run into a sunken reading nook. I called it the trench. Visitors always asked about the name, and I'd smile and say, "Long story. Let's just say I had to fight for this spot. One day, I got a knock on the door from a younger couple thinking about moving into the neighborhood. They'd seen the listing for a house down the block and wanted to get a feel for the area. "You've been here a while?" the woman asked. I nodded. "Long enough to know what to watch for." She smiled. "Is the HOA decent?" I laughed a little. "Maybe too long." "They're quiet now," I said. "But make sure you read every single page of your agreement. And if they ever try to pave something they shouldn't," I pointed to the doormat, "just tell them to talk to me first." The whole ordeal taught me more than I ever expected. Taught me how easily small bits of power can balloon into full-blown abuse when no one's watching. It showed me how legalese can become a weapon, and how most people don't fight back because they assume the system is too complicated to beat. But here's the truth. You can fight back. And you don't need a law degree. You just need to pay attention, ask the right questions, and find people who care enough to join you. That HOA thought they were steamrolling a problem when they laid that road through my living room. But all they did was build a path straight to their own downfall. I didn't just get my house back. I got my neighborhood back. And now, when I sit in my reading nook with a cup of coffee and look out at my front lawn, completely, gloriously, road-free, I know exactly what I'd do if it ever happened again. Fight. Harder. Louder. Smarter. And this time, they wouldn't even make it past the sidewalk. Thanks for sticking with me through this insane story. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I've got more real-life HOA madness on the way. And trust me, you don't want to miss the next one.